The year was 1944. The USS Barb was running silent, 300 feet below the surface of the East China Sea. Above them, a Japanese destroyer was pinging the water, searching for their steel hull. Inside the sub, the air was thick, smelling of diesel, unwashed bodies, and strangely freshly baked bread. Leo Cookie Rossi was the master of the galley. In a submarine, food is the only thing that separates a crew from a mutiny or a breakdown. But today, with the ship in silent running, Leo's war had become agonizingly lent, slow. The stagnant kitchen in silent running, every sound is a potential death sentence. You cannot move a heavy pot. You cannot clatter a spoon. You cannot even turn on the electric mixers. Leo stood in his tiny galley, his movements like a film played in half speed. He had to feed 80 men without making a single metallic clink. He moved with lent, rhythmic grace, picking up a bag of flour as if it were made of thin glass. "Easy, Cookie," he whispered to himself. "Don't let the ladles dance." The pressure of the clock. The destroyer above was persistent. It had been 10 hours since they had dived. The oxygen levels were dropping, and the lent fatigue was setting in. The men in the torpedo room were lying in their bunks, barely moving to conserve air. Leo decided to make deep-sea rolls. He didn't use the mechanical kneader. He worked the dough by hand. He pressed his palms into the flour, the motion lent and steady. Each push was a silent prayer. He felt the vibration of the sub as a depth charge exploded a mile away. A dull, heavy thud that made the light bulbs flicker. He didn't stop. He kept kneading. The dough was warm, the only living thing in a world of cold iron. The scent of hope, the most dangerous part, was the oven. He had to open the heavy steel door with agonizing slowness. If the latch clicked too loudly, the sound could travel through the hall and out into the water like a bell. He slid the trays in. As the bread began to bake, the smell began to drift through the ventilation shafts. It was a lent, invisible wave of comfort. One by one, the sailors in the corridors opened their eyes. The smell of yeast and butter was a reminder that there was a world above the water, a world with sun and wind and kitchens that didn't shake. "Smells like home, Cookie," the executive officer whispered, leaning his head into the galley. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed with red from the lack of sleep. "It'll be ready when the sea lets us eat, sir," Leo replied, his voice a lent murmur. The breaking of the siege, 14 hours into the dive, the destroyer finally lost the trail. The pinging faded into the distance. The captain gave the order to level off, but they stayed submerged to be safe. Leo pulled the rolls out. They were golden perfect. He didn't use a tray. He passed them out by hand to the men as they sat at the narrow mess tables. He watched them eat in a lent, reverent silence. There was no laughing, no shouting, just the sound of 80 men finding the strength to last another day. The iron sanctuary, when the sub finally surfaced at midnight to recharge its batteries, Leo stood on the cigarette deck, taking a lent, deep breath of the salt air. The stars were huge and bright, reflecting off the black waves. He looked down at his hands, which were still covered in a fine dusting of flour. He wasn't a hero in the history books. He hadn't sunk a carrier or decoded a secret message. But he had kept the heartbeat of the ship steady when the world was trying to crush it. "The engines get us home," Leo said to the lookout, "but the bread keeps us from wanting to leave." The war eventually ended, and the USS Barb became a memory of steel and salt. But for the men who served in the silent service, the memory of the lent, warm smell of Cookie's galley remained the brightest light in the darkest depths of the sea.